When I bought Blackwood Isle, I thought I had found sanctuary. The island was a rugged, untamed jewel off the coast, just a mile from mainland yet completely isolated, a place where the rules of the modern world couldn't touch me. Towering trees lined its shores, their roots gripping the rocky earth like sentinels. The only sound was the crash of waves and the rustling of leaves, nature's symphony playing uninterrupted. For 3 years, I lived in peace. Then the letter arrived. It came by boat, delivered by an HOA representative who barely looked me in the eye as he handed me the envelope. He muttered something about an environmental initiative before quickly rowing away, as if sensing the storm this piece of paper would unleash. I unfolded the letter, scanning its contents. My stomach tightened. Dear Mr. Carter, as a resident under the Blackwood Shores Community Association, you are required to comply with newly implemented environmental initiatives, including the installation of shared solar infrastructure. HOA board members have voted in favor of this project. Installation will commence immediately. Failure to comply may result in legal action. Sincerely, Richard Langley, HOA President. I stared at the paper, stunned. I wasn't part of any community. The HOA governed the town on the mainland, a place I had deliberately left behind when I bought this island. There were no roads here, no services, no connection to their neighborhoods of manicured lawns and beige houses. I crumpled the letter, tossed it into the fire pit outside my cabin, and forgot about it. A week later, they came. At dawn, the distant hum of engines pulled me from my sleep. I stumbled out onto my porch, rubbing my eyes, then froze. A barge loomed on the horizon, its deck piled high with crates, solar panels, and scaffolding. Several motorboats trailed behind it, carrying workers in hard hats and one familiar figure in a crisp suit, Richard Langley himself. My pulse pounded. They were coming here. I grabbed my boots, threw on a jacket, and stormed down the shoreline just as the boats made landfall. The workers hopped out, already unloading equipment. Metal clanged against wood. Someone started barking orders. It was happening too fast. Langley stepped onto my land as if he owned it, brushing non-existent dust from his sleeve. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his posture exuding smug confidence. I marched straight up to him. What the hell do you think you're doing? He sighed, as if I were an unruly child. Mr. Carter, good morning. Don't. My voice was sharp. I didn't agree to this. You didn't need to. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, flipping it open with the ease of a man used to wielding bureaucracy as a weapon. According to the original land deed, Blackwood Isle falls under Blackwood Shores jurisdiction. That means you're subject to our community regulations. This isn't community. I shot back. It's a damn island. Langley's smile didn't falter. Semantics. He gestured to workers. The board voted unanimously. The panels will provide renewable energy for the town. And since your land was the only viable location. My land. Yes, your land. He tilted his head, as if speaking to someone particularly slow. And as a resident, you have an obligation to contribute to the greater good. I stared at him, barely able to contain my rage. You're saying I have to just accept this? Langley sighed again, exaggerated and patronizing. I'm saying it's already happening. And it was. The workers had spread out, driving metal posts into the ground, digging trenches for wiring, laying out rows of black solar panels like invading sentries. The sound of drilling, hammering, and shouted instructions shattered the island's quiet. I clenched my fists. You had no right to do this, I growled. Langley simply smirked. You should have attended the last HOA meeting. You could have voiced your concerns. I didn't even know about it. His brows lifted, mock innocence in his expression. Oh, that's unfortunate. Rage boiled in my chest. They had taken everything. My privacy, my autonomy, my land. And they were acting as if I should be grateful. Langley checked his watch, then clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. Look, Carter, I get it. You're attached to this place. But progress is inevitable. His grip tightened for just a second, a warning beneath the false friendliness. You'd be wise to accept that. Then he turned, already issuing more orders to his men. I barely heard him. I was staring at the monstrosity they had built in just a few hours. Rows of gleaming panels stretched across the land, blotting out the natural beauty that had once defined my home. A creeping sense of violation settled over me. They had stormed in like conquerors, stolen my peace, dismissed my rights, but they had underestimated me. Langley thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. Langley and his suits left that evening, their job done, their orders given. But the workers remained, spending the next few days fortifying their invasion, securing the solar panels, wiring massive battery banks, and installing monitoring stations. They walked across my land as if it had always belonged to them, laughing and joking the evening as their floodlights drowned out the stars. I watched from the shadows of my trees, seething. Langley thought this was over. He thought I would roll over and accept my fate. But he had forgotten something. This land knew me. It had bent to my will for years, yielding crops where soil was thin, growing thick and wild when I wished it. I had learned its patterns, its secrets, its power. And I was about to remind him who truly controlled this island. The first strike. I started small. That night, after the workers had shut off their machines and turned in, I moved silently through the underbrush. I carried a handful of seeds, saplings, and vines, each carefully chosen for its aggression. First, I planted fast-growing oaks between the panel rows, tucking the seedlings deep into the soil. Their roots would spread fast and wide, seeking moisture and weakness in the concrete footings of the panels. Then I wove wild ivy and creeping kudzu around the metal supports. These weren't just decorative vines. These were predators, known to choke and consume whatever they touched. Finally, I sprinkled invasive bamboo at the edges of the installation, just beyond the workers' sight. Within weeks, it would shoot up in thick, impenetrable walls. I worked until dawn, then slipped back into my cabin. The next morning, the workers noticed nothing. But nature had already begun its work. Escalation. Over the next few days, my army grew. The trees stretched toward the sky with unnatural speed, their trunks thickening, their roots creeping like silent invaders beneath the panels. The ivy and kudzu tightened their grip, snaking up the steel frames, coiling around electrical boxes, slithering into control panels. The bamboo shot up overnight, obstructing key maintenance pathways, forcing workers to hack through dense greenery just to reach their equipment. Then came the storms, unexpected, fierce, and fueled by the dense, thriving jungle I had cultivated. The islands, where there had always been unpredictable, but with so much new growth. The humidity soared, creating conditions for thick fog and violent winds that rattled the newly built infrastructure. Langley returned that week, stepping off his boat and immediately noticing the changes. His smug smile faltered. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, eyeing the thickening forest. His engineers scrambled to explain. "The vegetation's growing too fast," one of them reported. "It's blocking the panels, interfering with airflow, and—" A loud crack interrupted him. One of my oaks had split a concrete support in half, its thick roots crushing the foundation like brittle stone. The panel tilted, unstable, useless. Langley's jaw tightened. "This is sabotage," he snapped. His gaze swung toward me, standing at the edge of the tree line, watching. I smiled. "It's just nature, Langley. Can't control everything." The counterattack. Langley's response was immediate and brutal. He called in landscapers, men armed with chainsaws and herbicides, ready to strip my land bare. But I was waiting. As they approached, machetes in hand, I stepped in front of them. "This is private property," I said calmly. "You cut down a single tree, and you'll be charged with trespassing." One of them hesitated. "The HOA has jurisdiction." "No," I said, pulling a document from my pocket. "This island is now classified as a protected ecological reserve. Cutting anything without a permit? That's a felony." Langley snatched the paper from my hands, reading in silence. His face turned red. "You filed the paperwork last week. I finished. You should have attended the environmental review meeting. You could have voiced your concerns." His own words thrown back at him. His own rules used against him. He was losing control, and he knew it. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "No, Langley," I said, glancing at the towering wall of trees now surrounding his solar farm. You did. End of part 2. Langley wasn't finished. But neither was I. Langley wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat. After I blocked his workers from cutting down my trees, he pivoted to legal warfare. Within days, I received an official cease and desist order from the HOA demanding that I remove all unauthorized vegetation obstructing community infrastructure. The letter threatened fines, legal action, and even property seizure if I failed to comply. I laughed. This land was mine. I wasn't about to back down. And so, the battle truly began. Langley's first strike. Langley's next move was sending contractors in the dead of night. I had anticipated this. The first chainsaw revved at 2:14 a.m. I was already waiting. The moment the blades hit the first tree, I fired a warning shot into the air. The sound ripped through the night, sending panicked men scrambling for their boats. I didn't need bullets, just fear. By the time I reached the tree line, all that remained were abandoned chainsaws and trampled underbrush. The message was clear. Stay off my land. Langley doubles down. The next morning, Langley arrived with a full legal team in tow. His usual smugness was gone, replaced with cold fury. This has gone far enough, he snapped, holding up the cease and desist letter. You have 1 day to comply. I crossed my arms. Or what? Langley's eyes gleamed. Or we take you to court for interfering with community property. I let out a slow breath. He thought he had me cornered, but I had one last move. The killing blow. I pulled out a document from my pocket. Langley's brows furrowed as he read it. What is this? He demanded. The county repealed your HOA's jurisdiction over my island. I said, my voice steady. As of yesterday, Blackwood Isle is officially recognized as a private, sovereign property, no longer subject to HOA governance. Langley's face drained of color. No, he whispered. Oh, yes, I said, barely containing my satisfaction. Your panels? Your infrastructure? They're now illegal installations on private land. Langley staggered back, shaking his head. This isn't possible. It is when you have the right legal counsel and enough public support. I smirked. People don't like bullies, Langley. The media had exposed everything. How the HOA had stolen my land. How they had abused their power. The public outrage had been enough to force the county to strip them of control. Langley's fingers tightened around the document. You're going to regret this, he growled. No, I said, glancing at the towering wall of trees surrounding his precious solar panels. You are. Langley had lost, but I still had one final victory to claim. Langley stood there, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. His empire of rules, fines, and legal intimidation had crumbled before him, undone by the very thing he had tried to control, the land itself. He took a slow, measured breath, forcing himself back into his usual, polished demeanor. This isn't over, he said. I just smiled. Oh, it is. And now, you have exactly 1 week to remove your illegal installation from my property. Otherwise, I'll bill the HOA for trespassing and environmental damage. His fingers twitched, but he knew he had no leverage left. The press had already picked up the story, turning him into a villainous bureaucrat, a man so obsessed with control that he tried to annex a private island under false pretenses. His own board members were turning against him. He had lost. The fall of the panels. Langley left that day, and within 48 hours, the HOA began dismantling the solar farm. The same workers who had once hammered and drilled with arrogance now moved with hurried shame, tearing down what they had built under orders that no longer held weight. I watched in the tree line, my arms crossed, as they hauled busted panels, broken supports, and useless wiring back onto their boats. It was over. The final warning. A week later, a final letter arrived. But this time it wasn't a threat. It was Langley's resignation. The HOA had forced him out, blaming him for the public scandal, the wasted money, and the legal disaster. I sat on my porch, sipping my coffee, watching the sunlight break through the canopy of trees I had fought to protect. The land was mine again, untamed, uncontrolled, free. Langley had tried to take my home. But in the end, nature always wins.